Okay.
Weird years. You're going to want to break out the beer before you leave, I think. But so I'd like to hear, I think the best place to start is probably before your experience as a runner, kind of what initially drew you to films, at least as far as I can tell. Did you create a film about your mum pretty early on?
Yeah, well, so it started age 11. So it's a very...
What's the year?
It's 2007.
In 2007.
2007, yeah. 2007, I just started secondary school here in the UK, so like my first year of that, and clung onto a bunch of friends that we'd sort of just like piece together, very random, and then used to hang out in my garden, because like I had a garden and we were like not street kids, so we'd hang out in the garden. Now I think about it, it's kind of weird. But anyway, so we'd hang...
At the time?
Yeah,
amazing.
It was great. So we'd hang out in my garden, and then one time we're walking through my house to get to the garden, and my friend Joe says to me, my sister's camcorder was on the side that she got for Christmas like a couple years before and had no interest in. And he was like, why don't we make a film? And like, that was it. I'd never thought about making a film before that. And then my life was forever changed.
That's madness. That's like a flash of lightning.
Yeah, so...
You remember the moment? You remember...
Yeah, I can remember. I remember like, I'm almost like frozen in my like, in the like dining room where it was. And he says it, and then like the camera lights up, and I'm like, this is my future.
What's the guy's name? Joe?
Joe, yeah.
Thank God. I mean, he could have been like, let's smash it.
Yeah.
So I feel like he's a good influence.
We could have just carried on messing around in our garden like we always used to do, just mess it. Yeah, do dumb shit.
But now you're doing dumb shit and then filming it,
which is perfect. So we do that. So we start making these like little films in my garden and taking them into class, and I had like a couple teachers who really like saw that I was into it, and so like let me play my films, let me sort of encourage me to make more, and be like, okay.
Amazing.
And then we got to this thing where like every Wednesday we'd make a film on like the Monday, and then every Wednesday we'd play it, and they're like terrible. Like, I can't watch them back now. They're all like unlisted on YouTube, and I every now and then when we're drunk we'll watch them. And that's it.
God, the pain.
So that kind of like grounded me in that, and I got known for that in school, and so people started being like, you're the video guy, and it kind of gave me an identity because I was like the nerdy kid before that. Yeah. And started making more and more films, doing work experience, and I think I was like super young to it, but like when I was like 14, 15, I was trying to get into production companies and edit houses and anywhere I could to get work experience in the weekends and half term and at any time that I had free.
Well, was that London-based?
Yeah.
Did you go to a secondary school around the city?
Yeah, so I was kind of like just on the outskirts of London, so I travel in for that. And I remember like sending out like hundreds and hundreds of emails, just being like, and everyone was kind of like, who's this 14-year-old kid? Of course we're not going to give you work experience, like go away kind of thing. And I just didn't get it at the time. I was like, cool, I'll just keep going and going and going and going, and eventually someone will let me in. And mainly it was like edit houses because of insurance, and you're just in an office, so it's kind of fine. I was making coffee. And did more and more of that. And then I got to...
Who's the first company to let you in?
First company... I think it was a company called White House Post. They're like an edit house in Soho. Really small one.
And they just took a liking to you?
Yeah, I think they just were like, come in for a week. You can make coffee. Like if you want, I think I was probably stood around for the week. I didn't really do much, but probably just got in the way. But yeah, like those first few ones, they like, I got the taste for it, and I was like, this is nice. And my mates were kind of just playing football and stuff like, why aren't you coming and hanging out with us? But I was like, I just love making. I just love being around this energy.
Yeah. I think that, like, for lack of a better word, hustle and grind. I'm not really big fans of it, but I feel like you had that from a very young age, that sense of drive. Yeah. Is that because you just loved the feeling so much, you wanted another hit?
No, actually, interestingly, I think my drive is from my dad. Has always been a self-employed carpenter, and I think that from him I get this. I grew up with him having to go and like buy materials. Like his work never stops, so he'd be building wardrobes or whatever all day, and then in the evening he'd have to go and like price up the next job and measure up and buy materials for the next day, and then go and do it all again. And that was a constant cycle. And I think being brought up seeing that, I then applied that to this thing that I liked and was like, well, that he never stops, so I'll never stop. Yeah. And so, whereas I've never really experienced like a 9 to 5. been to a job where it just finishes at 5 o'clock and you go home and forget about it. I've always
And then go to the pub.
Yeah, it's something that like even from like age 14, I'd come in from work experience and I'd learn a new thing on like Premiere and I'd go and try it out myself, and that got me into that rhythm. And then I'd say like I did that for a bit. I then got like I started getting bigger work experience placements. Ended up getting into MTV to like edit department when I was like 15 for like 2 weeks, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Like this is like bigger than like, anything I've ever seen, and a big company and everyone. And also kind of like weirdly like got a kick from like when you say to people you've worked, and I was like 15 and everyone's doing their work experience at different places like for school, and I was like, I'm at MTV. Yeah. I was like, this is fucking cool. And I think that like even more so, I think that's a big part of the film industry, isn't it? That like it's like that was the driving thing, was like, oh, I feel like I'm being recognized here, like these bigger players are starting to notice who I am, and I'm 15, and started to see that I was like had a bit of a niche in being so young but being in the industry.
Yeah. It's kind of like the throw from being ahead of the curve a little bit.
Yeah, right? And I think like as much as people were like, why does this 15-year-old want to come and like run on our shoots on the weekend? I think also people were like, why does this kid? Like what's this is interesting.
What's behind it?
Yeah, it was like intrigued. And so I got like I got probably more replies than I reckon I would have if I'd waited a few years when everyone else was doing the same thing. And then yes, like meanwhile that's happening, I'm going to school. I tried to leave school when I was 16 to go and work in the industry, but no one would hire a 16-year-old. Again, I couldn't understand at the time. I understand now. Yeah. But like at the time, I was like, this is so frustrating. Why will no one hire me? But then I went back. This is another like weird chain of events. So then I went back to another school. I was like, I'll just waste a year doing some random like subjects, some sort of like film course that it has no weight. It'll never be able to take me to university, but it will be fun for a year. So I go to this other random school for 2 weeks because I got decent grades in my other stuff, and they saw I got decent grades, and they were like, you can't just study this like waste of time media course. You've got to do like maths and English and all these other like heavy subjects as well. And I was kind of like, no. Anyway, so I go to this. I turn up on the first day at this new school, and I know no one, and I'm very introverted back then. I didn't used to like talking to people. I just sort of did my own thing, and that was it. And I'm stood in this like the common room, and I'm looking on the wall, and there's like a painting of some cats on the wall, and I'm just staring at this painting. I'm like, if I just stare at it for 20 minutes, the next lesson will be after that. And then this guy comes over to me, and he says, "Do you want to sit with us?" And this guy is Ed, who I ever since then. So that was 6 years ago. We've become lifelong friends, and he works with me now. He's like a writer. He writes all my stuff. Amazing. And we kind of that was another one of those moments where like I had to get rejected from work to then go to this other school to then look at the cats, to get to meet Ed, who writes all the scripts for me now, to then like have that person that we bounce off. We're kind of a duo. And so I go back to school, I study for another year, I come out the other end, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to leave. I had another year that I should have been there for, but I was like, I'm just going to leave and go and figure it out, and I'm just going to make it not an option, because I'll figure something will happen. So I leave, I send out like 200 emails to every production company and ad agency and anyone vaguely to do with like moving image. And I get like 8 replies out of, I think I sent like 230 emails, I counted afterwards. 8 replies, 7 no's, 1 interview. And then that interview turned out I went to the interview and got the job, luckily. And I think that took like 3 months after I'd sort of started looking and stuff like that. So it was getting like, I was like, oh, this might not happen. Like I might just have to get like a normal job and give up on this dream.
What were you, 17 at the time?
Yeah, I was 17, yeah. And so I got a job in an advertising agency in Soho in London, a company called BBH. They're like a big ad agency in the post room. So I was just delivering posts around the building. But my mindset was like, now I'm in here, you can't ignore my emails because like I'm at your desk. So I won't
give you a post.
Yeah, so I'll just befriend, and like my job, like the post room itself was like a defunct thing by then. It was just delivering people's ASOS and stuff like that around the building, their personal stuff. So I was like, I'm just going to use this opportunity to become everyone's friend, and then when the time's right, I'll be like, can I move into the production department? And I was there for a year and a half in the post room, and like the last 6 months of that, I was like, can I shadow, can I whatever. Moved over eventually after a year and a half into the production. They started a new in-house production company. And I moved over into that as like the team that sort of started it. I was their assistant kind of thing. Was there for, I think, 9 months, something like that. And then I realized, I was paying a lot of invoices for other people who, I was on a salary and I was paying everyone's invoice, and I was like, these people are earning what I earn in a week in like a day. So let me leave and go freelance, was the mindset.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I jumped out of there. Went freelance as a camera assistant, as like a clapper loader, and did that for like a year or so, I think. And then after like a year, got hired on a job, weirdly by the company that I used to work for. It was like a KFC, 3-week KFC commercial, and it sounded like a dream when they first signed me up. It was like 11 countries, traveling 3 weeks, and then when it came to it, it was like 6 a.m. till 2 a.m. shoot days, and flying to another country every 2 days, and I was in charge of 15 flight cases. So I was like, it wasn't quite as fun.
Skinny guy, all these fucking
and I was
cases.
hell. I ended up with chronic nosebleeds. I was bleeding out of both noses. I had to get the doctor out because of the air pressure and the pressure of the shoot and everything like that.
Oh, buddy.
But anyway, so I was bottom of the crew, and at the top of that shoot was a presenter who was a YouTuber called Calix. And we didn't speak for the whole 3 weeks because he was at the top and I was at the bottom.
This is the KFC thing.
Yeah, and I was too busy like doing offloading cards.
Trying not to bleed out.
Yeah. And then on the last day we get talking and we swap numbers. And
did you intentionally want to go and talk to him? Or
no, I can't even really remember how it just happened at the airport when we were leaving. We're like, we'll stay in touch, because like we didn't even say about work. It was just like, let's stay in touch. And then a month later, met up, and sort of all this time, as well as like clapper loading, I've been shooting stuff, and as I had been since I was 11, I sort of weekends and evenings doing short films or nightclub videos. I came up for a lot of nightclub videos. That was like
commissioned.
Like, so
Did they pay you to?
Yeah, like getting but nothing, like £100 to like shoot and edit a nightclub video that you turn around in like stupid amount of hours. I'd be up until like 6 a.m. to get it out for like the next morning. And yeah, so I came up doing like loads of those, and I think that was like a really good grounding, was because that teaches you the hustle. Because like you just got to turn around this content and know what you're shooting and shoot for the edit and not give yourself too much hard work the next morning.
Yeah.
And I'd been doing that all the while, and then got speaking to, met up with Calix after the shoot, got talking to him and realised that like he had this massive audience, and I had the like production know-how to shoot stuff nicely.
Well, at this point, was he mostly just vlogging himself?
Yeah, so he was just self-shooting stuff. Okay.
And he just, it's like a personality kind of growth from that. Yeah,
so he basically just started in his bedroom filming himself, and then headed out onto the streets to film public videos and stuff like that. But I think because I didn't grow up watching YouTube, I was slightly too old for that. I grew up watching kids TV still. So I kind of wasn't tainted I hadn't watched YouTube, and so ideas that he had, I was kind of able to add to those ideas without like them being contrived or without having like the YouTube mindset.
You were drawn from like a different well, right?
Yeah, so it's like I'm like taking an idea and saying, why don't you do this with it? Because I'm thinking in a traditional way rather than like a YouTube way.
It is kind of an echo chamber, isn't it?
Yeah. So we start working like here and there. In that time I started shooting more as well. So we start working like on a freelance basis really. I'll come and shoot stuff for him maybe once every like 2 weeks or something like that, whenever he needs me. We'll start working more and more together. And I start getting introduced into like the circle of YouTubers that he's surrounded by. So like the UK YouTube community is very tight and everyone knows each other. So every YouTuber, like a lot of them live together and they're all just kind of friends. And they started seeing that like Cal's production values were going up and that he was making more and that stuff looked slightly different, and started being like, what's going on there? Who's shooting that? And then I'd start shooting stuff for them. So they'd be like, can you, when they had something like a bigger idea, they were like, could you shoot this little short film for me? Or could you shoot this little documentary piece, this 10-minute thing for me? And then music videos, stuff like that started coming up. And then Cal and I sat down and we were like, maybe we should make a production company out of this. Maybe there's a niche in like sitting in the middle of YouTubers and like brands or broadcasters or stuff like that, and being like, we understand both worlds. So like, I understand the traditional world, Cal understands the online world, and let's like bridge that. And so that's how like After Party Studios was born. And then we started that 3 years ago now in a little basement where you couldn't stand up because the ceiling touched your head. So I'm 5'11", the ceiling's 6 foot, and Cal's 6'2". So I was like, cool, this is the basement for us. This is really cool. And then he came and stood up.
He was like, shit.
Banged his head. Yeah, so...
it's to keep him humble though.
Yeah, we were like, it's good for the story. Like, we literally started from the bottom of a building. Yeah. So yeah, we start off we're in this basement, and we're kind of making... It started off as like an outfit really to make stuff for Cal. So like, we're making higher end content for him, branded content, stuff like that. Anything that he still shot bits and pieces himself, but anything that he needed more cameras for or something to be shot nicely, we'd do it for him. And meanwhile, we're trying to like do stuff for the wider network here and there. And then that grows, we do more and more music videos and branded content for other YouTubers in the circle.
Or within Cal's like main.
Yeah, mainly, yeah. And then and then the fight, so the big like KSI Joe Weller fight was a big YouTube event back in, what year was that? What year are we now? 2019.
It was like 16, 17, was it before?
2017? Where are we now? November. No, it must have been...
Bloody, you're getting old. The old time was kicking in.
2018, yeah. So back in 2018...
Last year?
Yeah. So back in 2018, there was this a boxing match between KSI and Joe Weller. It's like the biggest YouTuber in the UK, and another fairly big YouTuber. And that sort of kicked off in 2017, the late half, with sort of murmurs it was going to happen. And I kind of heard it was happening. I was like, we need to make a film about this. This needs to happen.
Where did that come from?
I've always been interested in documentary, and like, I kind of feel like a fly on the wall in this YouTube world. I've come from the outside of it. I come from like, my mom's like works for the NHS here, and my dad's a carpenter, and nothing to do with film, and nothing to do with like wealth of any sort or anything like that. And so like, or celebrity. So I step into this YouTube world and I'm like, this is fascinating. Like, these are...
I bet it's whiplash though.
Yeah, it's like these like fascinating characters that are all ultimately normal kids that have like started making videos in their bedroom, and just it happened to the spotlight turned on them and they became famous. So they're all normal deep down. So I relate to them on that level. And
a fundamental level.
Yeah, and so like hanging out, I get it, but like I don't get the fame at the time. And I'm like, this is really interesting. Like, and I have access to it. I can go and talk to them and ask them stuff.
And so that you're saying that kind of gave birth to the documentary idea, where you can show a different lens in which you don't usually
so it's like,
people.
I think that's the most important thing to me about making films, is that you tell a story that no one else can tell, because otherwise what's the point? Like, if someone else can go and do that same thing, then just go find something else. Because I guess like you mentioned at the start, I made a little documentary when I was at BBH, so I was probably like 18. I crowdfunded this little like documentary about my mom's experience of cancer called Mom's the Word. And it was based off the idea that she'd been through breast cancer, and that was like a 3 or 4 year process, and then we hadn't really spoken about it at the time because like you just kind of got on with life. And then afterwards I kind of sat back and was like, we didn't speak about any of that, so why didn't we? And let's explore that a bit more, and made this little documentary piece. And
so the documentary is kind of a conduit also, just to be able to talk to
them up, right? It's like it made it happen. And I don't know, I've always been interested in mental health and why we do stuff and why we act and why men shut off from the world and stuff like that. So I guess that was the early sort of versions of that, of me wondering why I hadn't spoken about it and trying to find out more. And so I guess I'd always been interested in documentary and showing like that something. My mum, I'm the only person who has access to that viewpoint on my mum. No one else has that. And so similarly, I'm looking at this KSI fight and I'm like, no one has this sort of outsider-insider perspective on this fight. So like, let's and I know the wider world will be absolutely bemused when this gets announced that it's happening.
Yeah.
So like, let's try and explain it and why it's happening and what's going on and what's going through his head. And this guy is like, KSI is like the most fascinating character. He's like a normal guy, but the volume's turned up to like 100. So like everyone's listened to him and everyone listens to what he says, and where he goes, the world goes. Yeah. So I'm like, if he's going boxing, the world's going boxing. Like that's, so let's document this.
It sounds like a Steve Jobs reality distortion feel kind of thing. It's just like he has so much charisma.
Yeah,
it's just like its own gravitational pull.
Yeah, just like if he says that that's the thing, that's the thing. Like that's the next big thing. Which is great. So I was like, and I get really well with him. Like before making the documentary, we'd made a number of music videos and sketches and stuff like that, and we just bounced really well. Like it's just a laugh. So I think like it wasn't too big of an ask to be like, let's hang out for the next like 6 months, and like I'm not an annoying camera guy that's gonna be like winding you up. Like we'll have a laugh, it'll be fun. Yeah. And so yeah, that's kind of how it's born. I remember sitting in a restaurant, an Italian restaurant in Soho, a very cheap Italian restaurant in Soho. With
I love the classification.
It wasn't a nice affair. And I'm sat in this restaurant with, so it's myself, Calix, Richard Mansell, who's he's one of our founders, one of the co-founders, who comes from he's like a business genius. Yeah. So again, one of the reasons that After Party came to be was that like he was like, this makes business sense. And that's the kind of thing, is like I'm left up to do the creative stuff, and that stuff Cal's left to do the sort of like relationships and making stuff, famous stuff, and Rich does the business stuff. And we kind of I don't tell Rich how to run the business. Rich doesn't tell me how to do the creative stuff, and vice versa. So, so I'm sat there, Calix is sat there, Richard is sat there, and Ed is sat there, and I'm like, I've got this idea for this documentary. Like, I think it'd be kind of cool, and like, it was a kind of a crazy idea. I was like, I need a bit of money to like from our sort of company reserves to like make it happen. And I was kind of like, this is a definite no. Like, it was one on the list of ideas of things that we were just talking about that day. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And I was kind of like, sorry? And that was literally it. It was, I went away from that, wrote up like a bit of a treatment, or like what it would be like, not a proper treatment. It's so funny to look back on now, making documentaries since, and the hoops that you have to jump through. Like, that was such a whirlwind, because it was happening. It was like, this fight is about to happen, about to be announced. Yeah. So we've just got to make it. Like, there's no point in writing a treatment. Just go and turn your camera on it and figure it out as you go along. So really unorthodox way of doing it. So we come away from that meeting, and then we figure out like a little, like a rough, like, not a budget as much, but like, this is how much it's going to cost to like first start shooting it.
And how'd you pull that together? It's just kind of guesstimations?
I was more looking at like how many days a week I'd spend with him.
Yeah.
And like, this didn't account for any like editing or nothing. It was like, we'll just shoot and we'll figure it out.
And is this, are you charging your own per hour rate on it?
So it's like, it was basically like, I think it was what I was getting paid as a salary by the company and how many days that would be. It was just at cost, because we were like, we'll make the money from the distribution. So we'll figure out how much it costs to make. We'll split it 50-50. We'll pay half. KSI pays half, and he'll be an exec producer on it. And then we'll split the distribution money. Yeah. Like, it's
the kind of thing where it's like, once you're a KSI in it, you're in the amazing position of knowing that distribution's a straight shot. You know what I mean? Hopefully, it's the kind of thing where you don't want to curse it beforehand. But I mean, it's the oldest play in the book. I mean, so a star in something, you know?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we kind of had no idea, and that's what I kind of love about the YouTube world, is that they're into like taking a punt. They'll be like, they'll just be like, let's just go and film this, and like, we'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
And it's irresponsible, but it's why such great stuff gets made on the platform, is because they're not sat in meetings for weeks, sort of.
It's just like
discussing it.
Cutting edge innovation, right?
Yeah. So we start shooting this. Start shooting the feature, and I shoot like maybe 40 days. I think I shot 40 days of stuff, and we do like big coverage of the fight, and I think we did like 8 cameras on the fight and stuff like that, because they had their own infrastructure, but it just wasn't. We were shooting 4K. I was kind of like, aiming for Netflix. So I was like, we have to keep everything 4K, and they're doing the streaming HD, and let's just do better. And then we've got this film. But we hadn't edited anything, so we get to like the week after the fight. I do my final interview with him after the fight, and it's great. We've got really great footage, and he won, so it was like fantastic. And the film was always called Can't Lose. So the film was
nice.
from the offset, from like the first week. He said it in my first interview like 10 times, and I was like, that's the name of the film, like that. Can't lose, like, and that's his mentality. He wouldn't answer any questions on losing, so I was like, can't lose. And so it made it, because we were like, it'll be ironic if he stood in the premiere of it beneath a big sign that says can't lose, and he did lose. So we get to after the fight, I do the final interview.
The most enormous amount of footage.
And then I'm like, okay, maybe we should start editing this now. Like, what do we do? So we find like a freelance editor. We had a bit of a nightmare with that whole. We had an editor who held our hard drive hostage for a period of time, which delayed the thing.
Sorry,
so we're kind of like, we probably should have thought about this and been editing ahead of time to release the film after the fight, because that's when it's relevant. Like, that's when it's the story of that fight.
It's like you said before, the train was moving. You barely had time to hit record and like turn the camera, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, the team that was making this was like me. Like, I produced it, shot it, directed it, and then.
Was anyone helping you with the actual interviews, or was that just
No, just me. I would turn up and like set up a softbox, and we'd light it, and we'd just figure it out. And it was very much like, and that was what was great about it, was because it started with such a small project and it kind of grew, but we never had time to adjust the crews or anything like that. Yeah. And I kind of didn't, my documentary style was more just, I hate having other people in the room when I'm shooting stuff, because like, I've done stuff since where I've had more people, where it's like, okay, we can afford bigger budgets now, let's have a whole crew. And your interviews are just shit, because like, it's not the same as just having a small number of people. And so we sort out the editing problem, but now we're in so the fight was in February, we're now in June. Yeah, June. And we've got like a 45-minute cut of the film, really happy with it. But we're kind of like, what do we do with it? Do we just put it out on like a YouTube channel? Yeah. But like, realistically, it would never make the money back that we spent on it, so what's the point in doing that? And we kind of had aspirations for it. Was kind of like one of the things where we'd spent the money on it, half, I think, being like, we should make this back. If we don't, like, we tried.
Yeah, exactly. Is this the debates between the after party? Like,
so it's like, what do we do with it? And I think we all agreed that the aim was to try and take it as big as possible. So like, we'll take it to a distributor, we want it on Netflix or somewhere like that, or on TV or wherever, and we'll do it for the status, we'll do it for the name on the sort of opening credits, so that everyone's like, oh wow, like they got it there. And
did you consider festival runs?
No. The YouTube world, like, I personally have like no interest in like festivals. I think a lot of them are like just self-serving,
bureaucratic kind
of. Like, I think especially like I've spoken to a few people in like different festivals or different things, stuff like that, and like the traditional world hates YouTube. So I'm like, I'll just give up. As long as I'm making films with YouTubers, like, don't need your crest or whatever, like your what's it called? The blooming laurels. Yeah. I don't need that, because like KSI will get it like 10 times the amount of views, a million times the amount of views. So like, thanks, but I've got the validation of 10 million people, so I'm good. And so that was never kind of, no interest in doing that. And like the whole, that's like a thing. I mean, that's like a very YouTube thing. YouTubers have no interest in award ceremonies. There are a few like YouTube award ceremonies that no one really cares about. There's the
YouTube plaques, right? But that's kind of not a...
Yeah, that's more like, that's like celebrating how many people, like, that's different, but more like the, I don't know, there's not like...
Really? There's Webbies? Was it Webbies or something?
Yeah.
But I know what you mean. It's not like, you talk about film, everyone knows about Oscars. There's no like YouTube...
Yeah, or like, and I think that the people that care about the Webbies are like the brands, are like the production companies like that,
absolutely.
But not the people that actually made YouTube what it is. And I think so.
I mean, YouTube now is getting such a mass size that there's different communities of YouTube, right? There's the old school YouTube,
Yeah.
which is just like the direct to the audience. This is what the art form is about, and then now it's getting like lost, or it's getting it's dying out.
So I think so we never considered taking it around festivals because I think it's just like even if it won something, it wouldn't really mean anything to them.
Yeah.
So we were kind of shopping around a few places, getting nowhere. And like you say, like I think like in a cocky way, we were kind of like, oh, it's got KSI in it, and it's the biggest internet event in history. Like this brought in like I think that fight got like 40 million views. So in sort of the first 48 hours. And it was huge, and it did more views than like the FA Cup final and Wimbledon combined or something nuts like that. And so I think our mindset was like, this will get picked up, no problem. Like you'd be silly if we go and knock on your door with this. Like you're lucky that we've come to you with this film because like you'll never port this audience over yourself. Yeah. And then we're knocking on the doors and no one's answering.
And no one's opening it.
And we're like, what's going on here?
Are you just cold emailing people asking for meetings?
So I think like through contacts normally. So we're going through people. Yeah. But still, you're getting like, oh, it's really good, but like, no thanks. Like, and I think at the time there was like a lot of skepticism about YouTube. We just had the Logan Paul had just done, so the big American YouTuber had just filmed in the suicide forest and had that big scandal. Had that, and there was the whole ad revenue stuff with like PewDiePie, the biggest YouTuber on the platform, had had the Wall Street Journal after him for making various comments and stuff like that. Yeah. I think the traditional world were like, we don't want anything to do with this really volatile YouTube world and these uncontrollable kids. Yeah. We're good. We'll just stick doing our boring stuff, and like at least we're safe. No one's gonna come and knock on our door and tell us that we're cancelled. Yeah. And so so we're kind of getting nowhere. And then we hired a guy called Josh Barnett, who's our MD now, and he sort of came in. He's come from like ITV and a bunch of other like places, and he's like an incredible sales guy, and that was what we were lacking, was the sales guy. So like I'm the filmmaker, Ed's the writer and the creative, Cal's the YouTuber, Rich is the business guy in terms of like the running of it, but like you need the car salesman.
You need the Jordan Belfort.
Yeah, you need the person that can talk the talk, and none of us can talk the talk. And so then Josh comes along, and pretty swiftly he gets in a few good conversations with people. They're like contacts that he had, and is just good at wording it the right way. Yeah. I think that's half of it, is just being like making it sound good. Yeah. And then fast forward maybe like a month, and we get into a meeting with Sony Pictures Home Entertainment. So they're like the branch of Sony Pictures that do all the distribution. And we sat in this meeting, and halfway through watching the trailer, they were like, "Yeah, cool. So like, when can we have the file? Like, yeah,
give us the file."
Yeah, and we're kind of like, "Oh, okay." Like, because after so much like
rejection,
yeah, it's hard. You just resign yourself to being like, this is gonna sit on a hard drive, or it's gonna go on YouTube, and it'll be great, but it won't reach the level we want it to.
Yeah, totally.
So they bought it. Or it was like a bit of a complex like financing model. I think it was more on like revenue split and a bit of an advance and all stuff like that. Okay. I kind of stay out of the business end of that stuff. But so they basically agreed to take the film and distribute it in the UK, Australia, and Ireland. I think it was those three.
And is that just all streaming?
No, so that's on. That's for sales, transactional sales. Okay. And so for the rest of the world, we were like, what do we do? Speaking to more people, speaking to like the Twitches, the different, like literally spoke to everyone. But no one would take it at the time. So I think we ended up putting it on Vimeo, on like the Vimeo on demand.
So the paid for.
Yeah, the paid for thing you do yourself is like a self-service thing. It did really well. Annoyingly, Vimeo had like no interest in pushing it. We were kind of like, it's this thing, we go around like trying to explain that it's got the UK's biggest YouTuber in it.
But it doesn't come, it's like a disconnect. They don't understand.
Yeah, they don't understand it. And we were like, you're Vimeo, like you're like the direct competitor to YouTube. Yeah. Steal some of their audience, like bring some people over and curate a page where like KSI is at the top of it, and then you've got a bunch of other stuff that people will stay for. Yeah. They're no interest in it. So we were like, okay, whatever. Didn't even manage to get, I was like, can we have a staff pick, please?
Yeah.
Like, we're
it's not even homepage.
But we must have, I'm pretty sure we must have brought more transactions to Vimeo that year than any other film.
Combined.
Yeah, like than any other, because like all the other films, as much as the sales they must do, there was no one mainstream in any of them, and there was no like sales push behind it. We had like marketing spend and all this stuff like that. And yeah, nothing, no love from them. So I was kind of like, okay, that that hurts, because like we were kind of betraying YouTube in a way. We were kind of like, these guys were raised on YouTube, and we took the film and released it on Vimeo around the world.
Yeah,
I'm like, are you not going to say thanks? Nothing.
Bizarre.
Yeah. So released that, had that cycle, and that was kind of it for a period of time.
But there was enough revenue that was coming from Vimeo, right? People were still watching it.
It did great. It did really well. I think that was like the test case that proved it. It was like, okay, this model works. And then and of course, like Sony came back and were like, cool, what can we do next? Like, what's the next one and stuff like that. And that kind of parks for a while, that the whole can't lose thing. And meanwhile, JJ was going on, KSI was going on having other fights and doing other stuff, and I was capturing bits and pieces of that. And was like, maybe we'll do a sequel, but then there's only so much boxing you can watch, and this guy's kind of doing the same stuff. And then he has the big fight, and then he has a second fight last year, so 2018, against Logan Paul in Manchester in the UK. And again, and that's even bigger, and that's like the biggest event in history again. And it ends in a majority draw for KSI. So he retains the belt. But they basically like, okay, we need a rematch. And I'd shot that, so that week of that fight, I'd shot that again, just in case. I was like, I just should get it on tape, because no one else is. And then we get to halfway through this year, so they've agreed to a rematch. It gets booked in for November in the Staples Center in LA. It's like 24,000 capacity venue. Eddie Hearn, who's like the biggest boxing promoter in the UK, or in the world maybe, like makes the fight, and it's a huge affair, like mainstream. Justin Bieber's going to be there. Wiz Khalifa was there. Like random, the whole like Justin Bieber's posting on Instagram about like how JJ's going to get his face like punched in and all this stuff. And I'm kind of sat there being like, well, we've got this footage from the last fight and the second fight that we never used and no one's seen, that's like inside the dressing room, and it tells the story of why he drew the fight, because his head wasn't there. When you compare side by side him in the first fight to him in the second fight, in the dressing room beforehand, they're different people. In the first one, he's calm, he's relaxed, he's loving life, and in the second one, he's silent, he doesn't say a word because his just head's gone. And so I'm like, I kind of say it jokingly, I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to do like an extended cut, like a director's cut with this new footage for the second, and release it around the second fight, because all our relevancy comes around the next fight. Actually, I should go back and say that. So with the Sony, when Sony picks it up, it was in the 45-minute form I mentioned, and they were like, to get into feature film stores, it needs to be 61 minutes. So you've got like, we were going to release it, the plan was to release it the week before the next fight against Logan Paul, that was in the August. And they were like, so August 10th, I think, was the release date. We're in July now, probably. No, June, we're in June. You've got 2 months, but you have to deliver a month ahead to get it through into all the different systems and stuff like that. So you've got 4 weeks to go and add 16 minutes to your film. And so I'm like, okay, well,
a quarter to the film again.
If it means like the difference between Sony or no Sony, then we'll do it. Like, we'll figure it out. But the 45 was really tight. So we were like, instead of going back into there and extending bits out, when we were really happy with the timings, let's add 16 minutes at the end. And you can see it when you watch the film, there's a moment where it switches, the quality just like tanks.
Oh no.
And it was like a killer, it was like soul destroying, but equally like, you've got to do it sometimes because it's Sony or no Sony. And so we'll suck it up and figure it out and all that. So we pieced together this last 16 minutes in it, and the film goes out the week before, and it does really well and sort of really well received, because I think anything the YouTube online audiences just aren't used to seeing high quality content with YouTubers in it. So I think it was always going to do well in that sense, but I think people just love KSI. The story was right, the timing was right, the topic was right.
So you said the kid's like gravitational pull.
Yeah. And so so we jump forward to the director's cut. So we're like, so I say like, I'm like jokingly to the guys that I work with in probably, where are we now, November? Probably like June. June, July. I'm like, wouldn't it be like fun if we cut off that 16 minutes that I despise of the first film and like re-edit it and put all the new footage that I captured in there to tell the story from after that fight leading up to this one. And then again, like kind of expecting them to be like, oh yeah, good one. They're like, oh, let's do it. Yeah. So then now I'm like, okay, great. And now I've got like 2 months, 3 months to go back and like figure it all out again, do it, rescore this last bit and stuff like that. And and we did it and we made this, and then that cut ended up getting picked up. We did all the same. We decided to self-release it this time in terms of like globally on streaming platforms.
So just because like uploading it to like Prime, all the stuff yourself?
Yeah. Just because of the success of Vimeo and kind of just being like, let's just try it, let's just see. But also got picked up by Sky Sports in the UK, which was like huge because it was kind of like completing the set. We'd done online. It had been in a cinema for the premiere, and we were like, TV is like the Holy Trinity.
Yeah.
So
the devil's fleeced themselves.
Yeah, so like so that was really cool, and another experience entirely of like how to sell it to them and prepare it for TV and stuff like that for broadcast, and where the breaks go and all that kind of stuff. So that got picked up by them, and that was huge because Sky Sports don't buy external like content. They don't acquire stuff. That's not their thing. They make it. They've got such big production teams. They make everything. They just didn't have the time, I don't think, to make something about this YouTube fight because they were taking the pay-per-view of the fight itself, and so I think they needed to explain to the audience what this YouTube fight was, what on earth's going on. So that was really cool. Ironically, like meant more to my mom and dad. I've made content that's gained like hundreds of millions of views on YouTube. But this came on TV. They were like, okay,
now it's real.
You're legit now, which is funny.
For the when you say that they picked it up, did that stop you from releasing it in the UK? Did they want exclusive rights? Or?
They take it exclusively.
Because you can still
they're just on broadcast.
Put it on Amazon Prime in your
yeah, they took it on broadcast.
Okay.
Yeah. I think like that's the great thing is we have a great sales guy who knows what is like. There's no putting the wall over his eyes, so he knows like what a good deal is, and knows what a bad deal is, and he knows how to get what he wants, kind of thing, and what we deserve. So so we haven't really been like, because I know of some stories of people who have been like done over by contracts and exclusivity and periods of time of not being able to release stuff. So we've been pretty lucky with that because we've got the right people and the right legal teams, and that's so important to not. I mean, you see it with Taylor Swift at the minute, innit? So you see it with like Taylor Swift with her music, like if that can happen to her, then it's definitely going to happen to the filmmaker.
The untouchable Taylor Swift.
Yeah, because like if it gets to the point when you've made, especially when you've invested your own money into this film, where like you're just like, I just want someone to buy it. Where someone they know like that they whoever they are knows that they can come in with like the smallest amount of money and take the biggest slice. Like they know that they can come along and just give you what it cost you to make it and take all the profit kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Because it's your baby, you've put like a year into it and all your money and all your time and everything. So yeah, I think that's really important.
So you guys were more savvy than that. You decided to go the self-distribution route. Was that worldwide self-distribution on the streaming platforms?
That was, excluding a few places. Actually, no, streaming, it was worldwide.
Okay.
And then it was on sale pretty much worldwide, apart from a few places that Sony kept hold on to because from the last film we couldn't. I don't know if we couldn't or it just didn't feel right to be selling two versions of the film in the same place. And I think like that's the YouTube, that's the sort of YouTube way, right? Like we saw a really good sentiment back for putting it on streaming and not making people pay for it. I think because the first film was just you had to pay for it. And I think like the YouTube audience responded really well to just being like, okay, we understand this model. Like we're a member of Amazon Prime, so we can watch it for free. And everyone wins. I think that's what they were used to. I think it jarred a bit with the first film where everyone had to pay for it and they're kind of like, oh, I don't really want to pay for it, but I have to because I need to find out what happens in this film.
And so the Amazon Prime thing did really well.
Yeah, as far as I mean, it only went out like 3 weeks ago, so I don't think you get proper reporting back. But in terms of like, I'm talking more in terms of like the sentiment you see online, because that's like how again something from coming from a YouTube background, you listen to.
That's what matters, right?
Yeah, you listen to what the people are saying and you adjust stuff, and you even when like making the feature, or like doing the director's cut, you're kind of like seeing people's tweets and being like, oh, I'd like to see this, and you're like, oh, would you? So then you go and film a bit of that, because like that's the benefit of working with online talent and who have social followings and who have people constantly talking. There's always a buzz to react to.
And so it seems like a lot of you basically picked, you yourself crazy talented, but you picked an amazing group of people to be around you. Is there any takeaways that you've taken from that about how to surround yourself with those people that you genuinely love, you genuinely connect with, and that provide skills that you yourself don't actually possess? Yeah,
absolutely. So like, this film doesn't exist without the team of people around me. So like, my editor Dan, so like Dan Hearn, who we met for recommendation. I kind of only hire crew for recommendation these days because of the guy who held my hard drive captive. Ever since that happened, I was kind of like, okay,
deeply scarred.
That was someone off Facebook, and like I was like, okay, I can't be like just randomly hiring people anymore because that's dangerous. So I got Dan for a recommendation, and we clicked. And one of them ones where like he just kind of gets storytelling and goes in deep. He's not lazy. I've worked with editors in the past who will just skim through the rushes. Dan watches the rushes, and you can tell because there's stuff in there, there's jokes or things that he keeps in that you're like, you wouldn't have picked that up by like looking at the peaks on the audio to see where someone's talking. You've gone through it. And so like he gets it, and I sort of trust him to go and cut. Like I'll give like a brief overview of what I want to happen in a scene, and I'll leave him to go and figure it out and cut it before. I won't sit there and sort of like handhold him through the process because I don't need to, and he makes better stuff without that anyway. So it's like him, JJ Mitchell, who's like musical whiz kid who I've worked for. I mean, this show, I'm moving in with him next week. So this shows how close we are. It's like after the process of making this film, we're not hanging out so much. It wasn't enough hanging out in the studio making the film.
24/7.
Yeah, we need to live together. So I found him through a mutual, again, same kind of thing. And years ago, I used to bring him in on like sound jobs when I was working in the production company at the advertising agency. I'd basically like, they'd need a sound guy or something, and I'd call him up and be like, do you want to come in that? And that's how we started off. Amazing. Bits and pieces. Like that's what, like the film industry to me is just about hiring my mates. That's really, it's like a bit of a bank heist where like, I'm like, okay, we've got like 20 grand to make this thing. How much of that can I give away? And I like the guys I work with, Josh, he like hates that that's my mentality, but it is like, that's, I think, that why not, like the best stuff is made when you're working with the people that you love and that you're like emotionally attached to in some way. I'm not about turning up to shoots with people where we just sort of like have cold conversation and we never talk again afterwards. Like all my crew long-term crew, we hang out, we play cards. I'm going to play cards with a few of them tonight. Like it's more than that, because I think to make really emotional stuff, you have to have that vulnerability and be able to not feel judged and not feel like any idea you say is stupid. And
to make that, I don't know if that maybe it leads to you have that emotional connection. One, you have like a much more of a unified vision, right? The chances of your vision of what you're actually making together being the same is much higher.
Yeah.
And the stuff that comes out of it at the end, the actual film, video content, that's part of the, like for lack of a better word, the experience.
Yeah.
So I think what we found working on the film was that the process of shooting it in itself almost makes the whole thing worth it. That moment of time where you bring that community together.
That's why, like when we were going to do the extended cut of it, I was like so excited. I was like, I get to revive this, like going back and doing the music and the extended cut ends with this big. The last scene goes through this kind of like emotional track, and then it drops into the credits, and it goes into like an orchestral version of the final track, and like. And we were like so excited. We were like sat there like 1 a.m. with our like McDonald's just keeping us alive, and like this is sick. This is so much fun.
Yeah.
And that's maybe like the credits are maybe my favorite scene of the film. Like that because of the music.
You stick with the McDonald's the night 1 a.m.
It's like because the emotion of making the film, like that's all tied up in it with me. I remember where I was from when we're shooting the scenes and editing the scenes and doing the music. And JJ's just incredible because he does his like a sound engineer, so he mixes the film, he does the like sort of dialogue mix, and then an incredible sound designer and an incredible music producer, and he does music as a separate thing as well. So he kind of gets both worlds, and it just ties up. And in a boxing film, it's sort of like rhythm and sort of looking at the footage and being like, okay, let's take the viewer on a journey of pace and let's direct to their heartbeat kind of thing. Yeah, he just gets it, and we get each other. And same kind of thing as with Dan, where I can just be like, this is the vibe, so maybe send a few references.
It's like a shared language, right?
Yeah, and leave them to it, and come back and we'll tweak it. And sometimes we bounce together and have an idea and do it together, but often he knows it better than me.
Yeah. Why did you use the soundtrack? I get, well, for the editor, because you had so much editing experience previously. Why did you decide to find someone else for it?
Because like documentary editing is a different beast.
Yeah.
Like, so I think we shot like 30. It was maybe like 35 days on average, and most of those days were like 2 hours of footage. You got 70 hours, and then you've got the multicam of the fight, which is like 20 minutes, 8 cameras plus all the before and after that day. It's a lot. Yeah. And like I was like, I just overwhelmed. And also like I've shot it, so like in my mind I've already edited it in my head.
Yeah.
And if I go and execute that edit, it will be terrible, because that's just it's just my tainted version of events.
Yeah.
Whereas like Dan comes at it again from outside of that world. I think it's important to he had an understanding of the world from like his research, and had watched like every boxing film there is, like heavily influenced by like Creed and different films like that. But he's watching that all for the first time, and he's taking it in, and he's like, okay, well, this is what Ben said the storyline is in this scene, so how do I manipulate this footage to convey that? Whereas I would be thinking I'm cutting that scene, but I'm not. I'm just cutting what I want people to see. And I think work is better when more hands have been on it and it's sort of been like refined.
Yeah. Because then in that situation, you maybe if he has more of a background in editing, it's the fact that are you saying that your vision it hasn't been tainted, but bringing him, having an objective view on the edit, just somehow adds another dimension to the film itself. And also like, I think it's also a way of making it like less personal, in the sense of if I had shot it, produced it, directed it, edited it, and then someone said it was shit, it would be terrible. Yeah, I don't mean like this. I've just dedicated a year of my life to this, and you hate it. But now
like,
someone says it's shit, you're like, that was Dan.
Yeah, I'd be like, well, yeah, we'll have another look at the edit then. And I think like that's part of it, though, isn't it? It's like let's share like
the pain and the glory.
Yeah, exactly. And like when everyone's saying, I had the person, one of the senior people from Sony came up to me after the premiere of it and was like, oh, so which post houses and which sound house did you use? Like, was it someone around Soho? Was it in Soho? Was it somewhere around there? And I was like, no, it's like a guy and a laptop, and his like JJ literally has like a home studio that's essentially like a laptop and a speaker and a little like MIDI thing, and Dan sits in an office, but essentially it's like it's not a fancy edit suite. He hasn't got an assistant. We're just like a bunch of people that kind of figured it out from a young age.
What you got. Absolutely.
Yeah, and made it happen. And and then equally like the third key crew member is Dan Carney, who's like the colorist, who again like here's the one, and like it was something that it never really crossed my mind, but he'd come from ILM, who do like Star Wars and stuff like that, and was freelance by that time, and had like such an in-depth understanding of like codecs and delivery and stuff that just doesn't even cross your mind when you're making the film. Yeah. But then you get like your delivery spec through from Sony, and they're asking for like 50 different versions and all this stuff, and you're like, what does that even mean? And who knows? And so like he brought that knowledge and like his great coloring and his own same thing, like where he went and did a first pass of the film. We kind of gave references, and he went and did it, and then we tweaked. But again, I just think like the four of us on that the finishing team, like everyone knew what they were doing, and everyone saw the opportunity. And what was great is everyone was on board before Sony were on board. So like everyone was just doing it because they wanted to do it, and because it was like, oh, feature film, like that sounds like a challenge. Yeah. And then it was great, like being able to text them and be like, by the way, Sony just bought the film, isn't that fucking cool? Yeah, and everyone's like, oh my god, no way, that's so cool.
But as someone who, if you say you're introverted, so it's like if you're being around people can kind of drain your energy a little bit. Yeah. Is there any sort of insights you have in terms of how to maintain your relationships with those people, how to cross paths with them? Is it kind of just serendipity? You're saying it's,
yeah, no, absolutely. Like I think if you go looking for them, they don't tend to turn up.
Yeah, because your approach is wrong, right?
I think like you have to do a bit of that at the start, because otherwise you'll never meet anyone if you just sit there and wait for them to knock on your door. They're not good at it. But like, yeah, I think recommendation, I think you meet a few people that you trust and then you take their recommendations and it sort of goes on like that. I've never been let down by that yet, because people tend to not recommend someone unless they would use them themselves or they'd put their name against them, because it's embarrassing if you recommend someone and they're terrible. Yeah. And it's just like, they're all like I said, the people that have like key roles. Obviously, like in the credits of that film, there's probably like 100 people that had some parts to play, from like a runner on something or camera ops. But like the key people, the sound sort of supervisor and the DOP and people like that, like have to be people that I would go for a beer with or play cards with. Like I can't fuck with anyone who I'm just gonna turn up and do a job and leave and not talk to for another 6 months until I call them again for the next job. Like, and especially I think maybe that's like just relevant for documentary, because like it's real stories and human stories that you're dealing with. So like you need to make it with real humans that you connect with, because generally like what interests me will interest the people I hang out with, right? Like we by that nature of us being friends, we have common interests. Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think like it's that's how often I judge like documentary treatments, stuff like that. Will be that I'll write up an idea and I'll send it to like the sound guy. I'll send it to JJ and I'll see what he says. And if he's like, oh yeah, it's cool, I'm like, okay, it's a shit idea. And if he's like, oh, well, this is sick, I'm like, okay, we should make this. Like this is one that you get it, and then I'll send it to the editor, and Dan will be like, yeah, like I love it, like let's.
And then it's off to the races.
Yeah, and then you start getting like people will start sending through like YouTube clips and be like, I see it like this, or JJ sends through. Had it yesterday, sent for a treatment for something, and JJ starts sending me back like, oh, the track should be like this, and you're like, okay, we're off. Like
and then you're buzzing.
Yeah, and then it gets, and that's the thing is like everyone gets excited and everyone motivates themselves, and you need that. You need to be telling each other what's good and what's bad and be honest. And
so if you were to go back, maybe when you first started After Party Studios, knowing what you know now then, would you have done things differently? And someone in that position, would you give any advice, having the perspective you do now?
No, I think
stuff?
like, yeah, man, I think like this whole industry is about like figuring it out. The part that I find myself in is very like, it's that online talent world and YouTubers and stuff like that. Like no one has a clue. There's no blueprint for it. There's no plan. Like if I was making documentaries in the traditional world, then maybe like, well, definitely like I'm finding now with doing more and more stuff with like traditional media and broadcasts and stuff like that. And like I say, like Can't Lose didn't even have, I don't think it had a treatment. I can't think where I'd find it now. So I don't think it had a treatment. Yeah. Whereas like now I'm doing like 20-page treatments and background research and like pre-interviews and stuff like that. And I kind of don't like it. Like I kind of like that. I find that approach really weird, and I'm like, oh, this feels like a really staged version of documentary. To me, documentary is finding your subjects and doing a bit of research, and then just
pull it together.
And then we'll like then turn up and film it and be like, cool. Like I can't pre-plan what you're going to say or do, so like let's just see where this takes us. And so I guess if we were trying to do more of that, maybe, but I don't know. I think it's all learning. Yeah. We'd never, if Can't Lose, if we'd have known now how you're supposed to like pitch a documentary like that and tried to do it with Can't Lose, it would never have got made. So like absolutely not. Like the naivety of being like, we can just do a documentary ourselves and sell it and it'll be no bother, meant that it happened. And it wasn't quite true, but like that's what made it. By the time we realised that like this is going to be a lot more hard work than we thought, we were halfway through it. So it was like, we might as well finish it.
I think that's definitely something to be said for that. I think the way you describe you, at least like the school of YouTube that you mostly surround yourself with, it's just it's like the naivety of youth, right? You just get you can get so much done. You push so many boundaries.
Yeah, and I think like I'm lucky for being so young that I kind of get forgiven for being a bit naive sometimes, and I can kind of just be like, oh, I thought it would work, and it didn't. So like, and I think that. I don't know. I guess it's all learning. Like I was 21 when I made Can't Lose when that came out, and that was like my life goal, was like to do a feature film. And I did it at 21, and I was kind of sat there being like, what do I do now?
I peaked.
Yeah. And so I guess like, but I'm still in that learning phase. Like I won't have, until I'm like 70, until you're like, I don't know, like, I don't know, you look at someone like Roger Deakins and you're like, you just know it, like you just turn up and you just know, and you've learned it, and I guess he probably is still learning, but like you kind of know a lot. Until you're like 70, I'm still learning. So absolutely not would I wouldn't go back and change anything, because all the things we've done, why we're here now and why we still exist as a company, and why we're still making films and stuff like that, is because we're constantly learning, and they get better, and you do stuff and it fails, and you learn from it.
Yeah. Last question, and then we'll wrap. What do you think you're chasing? If everyone's kind of got a hit in life before you leave the world, what are you chasing, and why have you chosen to do film to get that? I
think I'm about shining a light into like the darkest areas, I think is what ultimately makes me tick. So like, Can't Lose probably isn't like an example of that, but where my film's headed and some of the projects that I'm working on at the minute. So like, I guess Mum's a Word, the documentary about Mum's cancer, like that's an example of that. I'm currently working on like a mental health documentary about YouTubers and mental health. Another one about YouTubers and leukemia. And like they're all very dark topics, and I kind of realized that like that's what interests me is these topics, like applying that thing that the idea of like stories that only I can tell, but also like bringing hope to people and being like, okay, where's the light thing in this? If you're surrounded by darkness, which many people are, how do I find a story that is like the antidote to that? Like, how do I flip that on its head? So I think like a mixture of that and sort of telling those kind of stories, but also like wider. Like I guess my long-term goal is I'm chasing is like a style. So I'm like, I want to create a style that people watch and are like, that's like a rubber duck film. So I guess like Gaspar Noé, don't know if you know his films.
No,
He's did a film called Enter the Void. It was like his one that blew him up. But he's like a maniac. Like you watch his film, you can watch a music video he does or a film or an advert, and you know it's him. And I think like
he has a wavelength that you can just tap into.
Yeah, I think it's just like how it looks and how it feels and how it's shot. I think that's his signature, and I think that's like what I aspire to is that whether I'm making a documentary or whether I'm making a narrative feature or a short film or an advert or a music video, it has a style, and you're like, oh, that looks kind of like a rubber duck film, and then you go on IMDb and you're like, oh, it was a rubber duck film. Like that's why. I think that's to be aspired to. I don't just want to do documentary. I want to do everything.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All right, do you want to wrap it, my man?
Oh, this is great. I kind of don't. But
I know. For hours and hours. We shouldn't have booked a guest. We should just brought in the beer and just locked you in.